Have you ever looked at your wallet and felt like your money is just shrinking, even when your paycheck stays the same? Or do you hear about the national economy on the news and wonder what it actually has to do with your life? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the big picture, macroeconomics. It's all about how entire countries, not just individual people or companies, handled their money, jobs, and growth. So let's jump right in.
I mean, really, why does everything seem to get more expensive all at once? Why do we suddenly hear about unemployment going up all across the country? These aren't just abstract headlines, you know? They affect millions of us. And macroeconomics, that's the field that gives us the tools to understand and maybe even start to answer these huge questions. So to even begin to answer those questions, we first have to get a handle on the common challenges, you could call them the big economic headaches, that keep economists and politicians up at night.
We're talking about things you hear about all the time, right? Stuff like inflation, which is basically your money buying less and less over time. Or unemployment, where huge groups of people who want to work just can't find a job. And what about economic growth? Why do some countries seem to get richer while others just don't? And of course, recessions, when the entire system feels like it's slammed on the brakes. The key thing to remember is that these are not random events. Understanding them is pretty much the whole point of macroeconomics.
Okay, so to tackle these massive questions, we can't just look at one person's bank account or one company's sales figures. Nope. We need to get way up high. We need that helicopter view to see how all the pieces are actually connected.
And that brings us to the formal definition. The key word here, the one you really need to remember, is aggregate. It just means total or altogether. See, macroeconomics doesn't care about the price of one cup of coffee. It cares about the overall level of prices for everything across the entire country.
And this is where that classic forest for the trees analogy is just perfect. Microeconomics is down on the ground, studying the individual trees, one company's pricing strategy or one person's decision to buy a car. But macroeconomics, it steps way back to look at the entire forest. It's looking at the overall health of the whole system, its growth, and the climate that's affecting all the trees together.
This whole field of study didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually born out of a massive crisis. Before the 1930s, economists just didn't have a good way to explain something as catastrophic as the Great Depression. Then, this brilliant economist, John Maynard Keynes, came along. He developed a whole new framework, which is now the foundation of modern macroeconomics, to understand and, more importantly, fight these huge economic disasters. So how in the world do you map something as ridiculously complex as an entire national economy? Well, economists came up with this surprisingly simple and really powerful tool to do just that. It's called the circular flow of income. Think of it as our roadmap. A really helpful way to picture this whole thing is to think of it like your body's circulatory system. Seriously. But instead of blood, the economy has money, goods, and services constantly flowing between all the different parts. And this model, it helps us track exactly where it all goes. Now, to understand this flow, we first need to meet the four main players in this big economic game. We're actually going to build our maps step by step. We'll start with the most basic relationship, the absolute core of any economy, and then we'll add the other layers on top, one by one. Okay, so at its simplest, the economy is just a two-way street between households, that's you and me, and firms, which are just businesses. It works like this. We provide our labor to firms, and in return, they pay us wages. Then what do? We take that money and we go buy the goods and services that the firms produce. See? It's a perfect continuous loop. All right, now let's add the government to the mix. It's pretty straightforward. We pay taxes to the government. And in return, the government uses that tax money to give us public services, things like roads, schools, and national defense, which of course help out both us and the firms. And finally, let's be real. No country is an island, so we have to add the rest of the world, or what economists call the foreign sector. When we buy imports, like a phone that was made overseas, our money flows out of our country. And when we sell exports, say cars that we manufacture here and sell abroad, money flows into our country. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. This circular flow of money isn't always perfectly stable. The amount of money in that loop can actually change. I want you to think of it like a plumbing system, one that has some potential leaks and some extra faucets. First, let's talk about leakages. This is simply any money that gets taken out of that main loop between households and businesses.
If you imagine the economy as a big bucket of water, a leakage is like a little hole on the side that lets some of that water drain out, lowering the overall level.
And you guessed it, the exact opposite of a leakage is an injection. This is any money that gets added into the circular flow from somewhere else. Sticking with our bucket analogy, an injection is like turning on a faucet and adding more water, which raises the level of economic activity. And here is where you can see how this whole thing becomes this fascinating balancing act. For every single way that money can leak out of the system, there's a matching way for it to be injected back in. So when we save our money instead of spending it, that's a leakage. But when a company borrows that money to invest in a new factory, that's an injection. Taxes leak out, but government spending on new roads injects it right back in. It's this constant dynamic push and pull.
So why does any of this matter? What's the point? Well, because by understanding all these flows, the leaks and the injections, governments can actually try to keep the economy healthy and stable for all of us.
So, what's the goal here? Well, ideally, you want to keep things in balance, in what economists call equilibrium. When the money being injected equals the money leaking out, the economy is stable and humming along. But what happens if leakages are greater than injections? Like if people are saving a ton of money, but businesses aren't borrowing and investing it? Well, the whole economy can start to shrink, and that's exactly how recession can.
And this is how all that theory we just covered turns into real-world policy. If an economy is sliding into a recession, a government might try to increase the injections, maybe by spending a bunch of money on new projects or by cutting our taxes so we have more to spend. But if the economy is running too hot and causing prices to skyrocket, that's inflation, they can do the exact opposite. They can increase the leakages, maybe by raising taxes to try and cool things down. It's all about trying to steer the ship by managing these flows.
And that really brings us full circle, right back to us. Every single one of us is a part of this giant, complex circulatory system. And while our own income or spending might feel like just a tiny drop in a massive ocean, it's the collective actions of everyone, all the households, all the companies, and the government that create the powerful currents and waves that shape our entire economic world. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Thanks for digging into this.